Okay, everybody. So thank you for joining. And just like to remind everybody that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that recording will be archived for future viewing. Please could all participants mute themselves when not speaking, and please use the raise hand function when wanting to speak. When invited to speak by the chair, please ensure that your microphone and camera is on when addressing the committee. If at any point any participant is having difficulty hearing or being heard, please could you bring this to the attention of the chair or myself as Democratic Officer via the chat function. Thank you. So Nigel, over to you.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to the meeting. So the first one is on the item on agenda is apologies for absence. So I believe Gareth is going to join us shortly, but are there any other apologies for absence?
None provided before the meeting, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 then is the minutes held of the meeting on the 12th of December. So the minutes are in the pack ready for everybody there. We'll assume the minutes have been read. So were there any queries over anything in the minutes just for completeness? No. Perfect. So we'll take the minutes as approved. So we can mark those as approved, please. And then any declarations of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as everyone's happy. Perfect. Got this chair and things going well. Good. Number 4 then, report of the Chief Executive. So the audit of the 21-22 financial statement. So if I can hand over, if I can just ask for that to be presented just as sort of summary, assume everyone's read it, and just give us the summary of the key points, please. Who's taking that one?
Okay.
I'm going to ask Gemma to introduce this one, please, Chair.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've just got a few slides just summarising some of the key amendments that have been made to the accounts and the management recommendations that have been drawn out as part of the audit report. And at that point, I was going to hand over to my colleagues from Audit Wales to pick up on their audit report. So if you're happy, I'll just share those slides.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so in terms of the audit is now complete. The amended accounts that were circulated have largely been agreed by Audit Wales. There are a couple of minor amendments that I just note in the on the slide. So there's a typo in the infrastructure paragraph. I spelt determined incorrectly. The opening other reserves balance in the earmarked reserves disclosure note is understated by 50k, and that has an impact on the opening total. And in the note 30, the prior year's audit cost figure has been amended. So other than that, the accounts are as circulated to you last week. The accounts were delayed in part because of the issue with infrastructure assets. So as outlined in a previous audit committee, there's been emerging issues in England on the 2021 accounts, and a particular concern in Wales regarding the 21-22 accounts in respect to how we value our infrastructure assets, and that the balances weren't considered to be sufficiently accurate. Some of the delay has been around, we've had an update to the code and specifications for future codes for infrastructure assets released by CIPFA. CIPFA have also released a bulletin, and the Welsh Government have approved some additional regulations which enable us to make some changes to the way that we allow for derecognition of the carrying amount of the asset when we replace or renew it. And we have indicated in the accounts that we will assume that derecognition sum is 0. And that's anticipated to ensure that the way we show infrastructure assets is materially accurate in 21-22. So the amended disclosure is reflected in the amended accounts that you see. So as part of note 16, so you'll see that infrastructure is no longer shown as part of the full property, plant and equipment note, but it still is included in the balance sheet value, and therefore there is a reconciliation below the property, plant and equipment note that sets out the infrastructure balance and then reconciles that back to the balance sheet value. In terms of other audit amendments, they're set out in Appendix 3 of the auditor's report, which is shown at Appendix B. There's an amendment to the financial instruments note to reflect an overstatement of short-term debtors because it incorrectly included a VAT adjustment figure. There's an exclusion of some nil net book value assets. So whilst that affects the PP disclosure note, it doesn't reflect affect the value that's included on the balance sheet. The changes for the infrastructure assets are set out in the previous slide. There were some errors identified on the way that we classify our debtors in the disclosure note, and that's been picked up as a management recommendation. There's some narrative changes around the senior officer remuneration note, and that's largely around getting slightly more accurate start and end dates for officers that started and finished during the financial year. Most significantly in terms of changes to the accounts, there is a change to the capital accounting for a Transport for Wales transaction, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail on the next slide, and then some narrative changes and changes to the audit note. And those narrative changes include changes that were set out in the annual governance statement, but are relatively minor. So in terms of the amendment for the capital accounting for Transport for Wales, so this transaction took place on the 31st of March. In the draft accounts, the full amount of income was recognised as a capital receipt and was deferred, so it was recognised as a deferred capital receipt, and the asset balance was classified as assets held for sale. Following discussion with the auditor, the amended accounts now recognise a reduced amount, so 850,000 as a capital receipt, and we've also de-recognised the 1.38 million asset value that was shown as assets held for sale. Now, this increases the deficit on the disposal of assets by 4.887 million, and that's shown on the income and expenditure statement. And there is a corresponding impact on the unusable reserves balance. So there's an increase. There's a reduction of 3.5 million on the deferred capital receipts balance and a reduction of 1.38 million on the capital adjustment account. In addition, on the balance sheet, we now recognise the difference between the original capital receipt and the reduced capital receipt, 850,000. So we recognise that difference of 3.5 million as a capital grant received in advance. And that increases the short-term capital receipts in advance shown on the balance sheet to 13.4 million. And just to go into a little bit more detail about the nil value assets, so Audit Wales highlighted this as an issue of that they will be looking at this year, and they identified that a fully depreciated vehicle was included at nil net book value. And then we carried out a further review during the audit and identified £483,000 of vehicles that were disclosed in terms of within the gross carrying amount and the gross accumulated depreciation in the note 16, albeit this doesn't affect the amount of assets that are disclosed on the balance sheet. Just picking up the management recommendation. So there's a management recommendation in relation to deferred social services income. And I think how the council was allowing for this income is inconsistent with other authorities. And we currently allow 100% provision for bad debts for this deferred income until the point where the debt crystallises. So until the point that the property, for instance, is sold and we're able to raise a bill and collect it. Following a review of our historic collection, we accept that this provision for bad debts should be far lower. and as highlighted in the management response, we currently think that provision for doubtful debt should be approximately 18%, and we have made some reference to needing to adjust for this one-off adjustment of approximately 2 million as part of our latest monitoring report. But we will, of course, review that percentage to be applied as at 31st of March 2023. And then finally, there was a management recommendation regarding the classification of debtors, so the amendments were totaling 429,000, and the proposal is that we're using the historic classification of debtors, and that we can revise those classifications and potentially have far fewer classifications, which should reduce the probability of this error occurring. And we will review that as part of our preparation for the 22-23 accounts. Although I think some of this error occurred because of the sheer quantity of debtor transactions that are included in our 21-22 accounts as part of the grant position that we had in that financial year. So those were the points that I was going to pick up on the accounts. Happy to take any questions, and certainly I'll hand over to Steve and Leanne.
Just before we go there, shall I hand over chairship back to Gareth, as Gareth's arrived? So I will gladly hand that back to you if you're willing, Gareth.
That's very kind of you, Nigel. My apologies, committee, that I seem to have been having some connection problems from here in the Canaries, so my apologies. Thank you for that, Gemma. Steve or Leanne, do you want to pick anything up, please?
Yes, I will. I'll take over now, Chair. Thank you very much. But Leanne and I are both here from Audit Wales. We're both parts of the financial audit team. So, I'll take you through the report, and we'll both be available to answer any questions you might have. But just to sort of kick things off, really, and to sort of describe the nature and why this report is with you today. This report really concludes our financial audit for 21-22, and it's here for your sort of consideration to help inform your decision as to whether you wish to recommend approval by the full council of the accounts, which is due to occur next Monday. So that's the key sort of backdrop, really, to why this report is here. And it will come, it's a normal report for those of you who are unfamiliar with the process, at the conclusion of every financial audit we undertake. So every year we bring this report to the council. The main message of the report is twofold, really. We've completed our audit. That's the first one. And the second thing is subject to your approval, or the council's approval, we intend to issue an unqualified opinion on the accounts, and that's scheduled for next Tuesday, the day after council approval, if of course that does occur next Monday. But I'll take you through the main messages within the report, and I'll do my best to avoid duplication of the areas Gemma has covered, but undoubtedly there will be some areas of duplication, but I'll do my best to sort of minimise that. The introductory section of our report then, just start there, sets out some of our materiality levels. That's like the areas, the amount we consider to be, if an error of that magnitude arises within the territory of a qualified opinion, an uncorrected error, that is. So that sets out some of those materiality levels. It also communicates to the report here a number of changes to the audit team, or a key change to the audit team. In our audit plan, we stated that Claire James will be filling the engagement director position. However, from November 22, Matthew Edwards, an audit director within Audit Wales, has undertaken that role on this audit. He's undertaken this role on a temporary basis, and it's just for the conclusion of his 21-22 audit. And once we commence the 22-23 audit, a previous audit director who has been involved with the Vale Council audit, Anthony Veal, will be stepping into the role then. So that will provide some good continuity going forward. Anthony wasn't available, if you're wondering why Anthony hasn't stepped in to cover Claire's role. Anthony was otherwise engaged during that time. So as I say, my colleague Matt Edwards stepped in. If I'll move on then to the significant issues section of the report, because this section really provides us the opportunity to communicate the key findings of our audit. So there's 4 key messages to communicate there. We're going to encounter a little bit of duplication, I'm sorry, so I'll try to sort of cover this as briefly as I can, but get the message across. The first message is there is one uncorrected misstatement that I need to bring to your attention. This is something we need to do under auditing standards. The matter isn't material and it has no impact on our opinion, but nevertheless, I need to communicate it to you. And it concerns the matter Gemma just talked about briefly about the treatment of residential care home charges. And this is where a legal charge is placed on the property of an individual receiving care. The accounts, as Gemma quite rightly pointed out, include a debtor and a bad debt provision of £2.8 million. And in our view, we believe that approach was overly prudent. In our view, a significant, which I think is supported by comments from officers a moment ago, a significant proportion of this debt we feel is in fact recoverable. So, but as I said, we've raised the recommendation in regard to that, and it's been responded to positively. The second area, significant matter to raise, is the fact there has been a number of audit adjustments. Now, it's common to have audit adjustments, as you would expect from undertaking an audit. But they are summarised in Appendix 3 and have been covered already in some detail by Gemma. But I'll refer to those in a moment. The third key message then refers to the fact about the slightly protracted audit timetable this year. And as has just been pointed out, this is due to a national technical matter concerning the accounting treatment and disclosure of infrastructure assets. So it's not unique to the Vale whatsoever. It applies to all 22 councils across Wales. But this has recently been resolved by Welsh Government and SIPFA, and a remedy has been approved by both Welsh Government and SIPFA in terms of resolving this matter. The council have adopted that remedy and adopted that within the revised financial statements. So just an explanation really as to why the audit period has been elongated to the extent it has been. And finally, in terms of key messages, is the matter that we've raised 2 recommendations, but I'll cover those in a moment. So I'll jump now to the appendices within our report. There's 4 appendices, just to briefly mention. The first one is the letter of representation from the council. And this is the letter the council will be signing, subject to their approval again, on next Monday, on the 30th. And it includes commentary on that uncorrected misstatement, the reason why it's not being adjustment, and the action being taken to the council to address that. So yeah, that's there for your noting and information. Appendix 2 is a copy of our audit opinion. Suffice to say, there's not a great deal else to say on that, other than the fact it's an unqualified opinion. Appendix 3 provides a summary of the audit adjustments that have been made as a result of our audit work. I wouldn't cover these in any detail. Gemma has already covered them, but obviously very happy to answer any questions on them. But suffice to say, I think the most important thing to say here are there's two things to mention. First thing, none of them are material, so I think that's probably a point worth raising. And the other point is the fact that none of these adjustments have an impact on. There's no change, if you like, to the bottom line position. The draft accounts balances remain the finance team have been facing during the year in terms of dealing with more operational matters, as well as dealing with us auditors, if you like. But any questions? I'm happy to stop there.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. And clearly it's taken a little bit more time this year than usual to get where we've got to. A couple of good messages, I think, coming through, that the recommendations have been taken on board by the management and been endorsed quite clearly in regards to moving forward. The other good message is it's an unqualified set of accounts, which again is a very good message for everyone. And finally, I think it's just to me, rather than do it at the end, thank you and your team, together with the officer of team of the council, for putting in a tremendous amount of work in getting us to this stage. And clearly, we're looking backwards now in regards to the accounts. But again, tremendous amount of effort, Matt and Gemma and her team. So thank you for that. So open it up for questions now. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. And echoing the points you made about the unqualified audit, I think that's it's good. I think this is clearly, there's a limited number of issues that are arising. A question I have, though, is, and this is it's a difficult one for us because a lot of us are new councillors. This is a new committee, so this is not only historic, but it's prior to us being part of the council. So we don't have the benefit of speaking to you guys regularly during the year and picking up issues as they arise. But I noticed the value of the reserves that are in the account. I've also noticed them building over time. And I think a very, I suppose, simple question is whether you could outline the council's policy, if it has one, with regard to reserves.
I'm happy to respond to that question. I think, Councillor Hooper, our policy on reserves is that we have robust reserves, but I think the budget report that we've brought on the 19th of January clearly sets out that we felt that there was work to do in terms of aligning our reserves more successfully to the risks that we've identified as a council, and aligning those reserves to the budget strategy more successfully, as well as tightening up some of the controls in terms of how we report on those reserves and how we use those reserves going forward. So as you'll be aware, we have made some proposals as part of the budget that's out for consultation in terms of drawing down on some of those reserves for some cost pressures that we consider can be smoothed out or stepped in over a couple of years. So, for instance, the homelessness cost pressure and the energy pressures. We've also made some proposals around aligning some reserves to pay pressures and building up some reserves, so where we've earmarked some directorate specific reserves to create central pots for risk and investment reserves and reserves to support the digital strategy. So I accept that our reserves are robust, slightly off the back of some additional funding that we've received in recent years. It's enabled us to release some of our base budget. A significant proportion of that is earmarked for capital funding, but we're also hoping to utilise those reserves to strengthen our response to the challenging budget position over the next couple of years. And I can see Matt's got his hand up now, so I'd like to bring him in, please.
Matt?
Thank you, Gemma. That's the bulk of what needs to be said, but I just want to add a couple of things. There's often quite a lot of focus on the reserves when we're setting the budget and when we're closing the accounts, and sometimes not a lot in between. But what we have done this year is brought the reserves into our revenue monitoring. So there's a great increased visibility in them during the year as well. And it's really important that we continue to do that.
Thank you, Matt. Steve?
Yes, it's just to add a bit more information. Yeah, I'm not sure if your question, Councillor Hooper, was aimed at me or officers, but yeah, but if you were curious from an external audit perspective, the reserves policy is very much a matter for council not external audit, or certainly not financial audit. I would audit the accounts is geared around, providing an opinion on the financial statements. That said, we do work every year, or we have done over the last few years, on financial resilience, and we've been looking at reserves, things like saving plans, and we've been doing this work on an all-worlds basis. So with the focus of the work has been looking at each of the 22 councils, including the Vale, and we've reported our findings to the council. So that work is likely to continue, particularly in view of the challenging economic climate for 22-23 also. So I just thought it's worth chipping that in as well, because you might be curious on an external audit perspective of some of the reserve issues in regard to reserves and the wider sort of issues related to that.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Hooper?
Not entirely, because I think I don't understand what the council's policy is with regard to reserves. I can hear the words, we have robust reserves. I get that, I understand that, but I just wonder going forward. And I also understand the management of reserves is going to be improved going forward, which I also think we should be welcoming. But I'm just wondering, one of the things we have is an outward-facing opportunity at the moment to talk about the council's budgets and the council's finances. And one of the things that will be clear is that people would question the amount of reserves, particularly as over the last 2 years we've seen them increase significantly. And what I'm asking a question of is to what's the sort of level of reserves we would hope to have, because at the moment we have higher reserves in compared to other similar local authorities in Wales, and that can be described as being very robust and support. We're very resilient. However, that can also be described as us holding money that's actually the council taxpayers' money on their behalf and not really doing anything with it. So I think there's a counter there that we need to be clear about. The issue, I think, is a political answer.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting if there's any cabinet members on the call to answer that, I suppose. But that's, perhaps, Matt, you've got your hand up again, so perhaps you can give me a bit more on that.
Can I just interject a minute? I think we're just going off a bit offline in regards to what the functionality of this committee is. Obviously, we're looking at the assurance that the accounts for last financial year are robust. I think the issue for me, and I'm sure someone will tell me off if I'm wrong, is that the issue around the reserves policy is a matter for the council itself. And you will have received, I would have hoped, documentation about what that should be, because again, there's a lot of confusion about earmarked reserves and general reserves. And again, I'm sure that both Matt and Gemma could take you on a half-a-day seminar in regards to the purposes behind those. The general reserves used to be somewhere in the region of 4 or 5% of your whatever sum of money coming in the revenue grant, and then you've got your earmark reserves, which for very specific projects, which you've earmarked to do 21st century schools or whatever it may be. So I think it's a question in another place, Councillor Hope, but in reality, but I'm sure that both Matt and Gemma may be well worth picking it up for members, a little bit of member training in regards to what the reserve policy is and what are they used for, how are they determined, etc. Would that assist? Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to emphasise a couple of the points that Gemma had made, really, that obviously the council's budget is out for consultation at the moment. We'll be coming back to Cabinet at the end of February to be recommended on to full council, and that will set out our policy around reserves. But it is, as you and Gemma have generally set out, there's a notional sum for unknown risks that's the general fund balances, and there's been a rule of thumb, whether that's set at 3% of gross or 5% of net, for example. It's a number of different approaches knocking around. But then the balance of the reserves will be held for known commitments or risks, and that's the piece of work that we've done in pulling the budget for consultation together this year that we've reassessed where the council's risks are and done a significant amount of realigning of the reserves to match that. And we've also done a exercise to streamline the number of reserves that we hold to make it more transparent and accessible when we're reporting.
I think, but I do suggest, Councillor, that this is a fundamental question before Councillor Brethero comes in, for the members to understand, because I think your constituents out there think the council is sitting on a pot of gold, and they're not using it for anything. But I think it's information that really you need and the elected members need, so that they can explain to the public as well. You're not sat on pots of gold. Actually, some of it is targeted for very specific schemes, and others is in the event of emergencies and such like. So maybe a little training session by Matt and Gemma for the councillors may be very useful. Councillor Prothero.
Yes, thank you, Gareth, Chair. My question is to do with the level of materiality that you're referring to. And as I am a learner when it comes to governance and audit, is this linked to the actual uncorrected misstatements, that value, or is this a level that we've accepted is acceptable for your response as auditors to be unqualified? Have I made myself clear? I don't know if
I believe so. Yes, I'll do my best to answer, and if there's a follow-up, perhaps I can clarify. Yeah.
Thank you.
Every external auditor would set a materiality level, and our materiality level is set according to our sort of Audit Wales policy, and we got scope to sort of tailor that a little bit more, but generally it's based on on your gross expenditure of the council, and we base it on that level. So there's a set formula to sort of decide materiality, and we need to sort of set a materiality level because we need to sort of assess, first of all, that's where we say the accounts are true and fair in our audit opinion. If there was a material error, they wouldn't be true and fair. So the conclusion is there's an unqualified accounts. By that we're saying the accounts are true and fair, they're materially correct. And that uncorrected misstatement follows. We report uncorrected misstatements where we identify errors below what we call below our materiality level, but above our trivial level. And the trivial level is it's another amount we sort of assessed, but I wouldn't go into the detail there, but that's about £200,000. So this residential care home income issue is £2.8 million. So it's, as you can see, it's more or less fall in within the midpoint between our trivial level and our materiality level. So under our auditing standards, we're duty bound to sort of report anything that's identified between that trivial level and the materiality level. That's a long-winded answer, but I'm not sure if and I tried to cover the wider spectrum of the matter. But does that address your question, Councillor?
Oh, that really does help, actually. Thank you. Okay, so a material level then, again, is that a much higher figure?
The materiality level is in the report.
No.
Sorry.
What would constitute a material?
Material.
Is that another level again?
No.
It's about what it is it?
Materiality is covered within. Let me just find the section of the paragraph of the report so I can refer you to that. Paragraph 4 reports our materiality level, and that's £4.5 million essentially. So that's what if there's an error of above that level, which remains uncorrected in the financial statements, it would lead to an unqualified opinion.
Got you.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Definitely helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Nigel, did you have a question or?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one, really, I guess, about there are some obviously corrections that were made, particularly looking, for example, at the vehicle assets one around the 483,000. Just thinking of the learning inside the team, or the reason for that occurring, and just learning for the future then, so that obviously corrections like that don't need to be made in future, or they're understood in terms of why those corrections are being made. So just wondered what the process was really within the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think thank you, Chair. I think we had been reconciling additions and disposals for a number of years and not reconciling the overall fleet balance. So I think that's how this arose. So some historic disposals had obviously been missed. And whilst we have done quite a lot of work looking at our equipment and our infrastructure assets and intangible assets in terms of ensuring that they still exist, we hadn't done that same piece of work on vehicles. So now we have updated the schedule and we've done that full reconciliation. We'll be revisiting that annually, and we have now commenced our kind of existence testing preparation for the 22-23 audit piece of work around making sure that we are eliminating those nil value assets where they are need to be either disposed of or derecognised in the accounts.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear, because the value is added in it by external audit, in part by the independent view and looking at some things that you might have missed. So I'm pleased to hear that obviously there's a process in place to pick that up, and it's one area now hopefully don't have to worry about in the future. Exactly. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. There are no other questions shown. Any comments from anyone? No, if there are no other comments, you see the recommendation in the report that the appointed auditor of the audit of the Council's final statement 21-22 be approved, and that the final financial statements included in the annual governance statement and the final letter of representation be recommended for signature by those authorised. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Nigel. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Good John, you seconding?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone against? That's the easiest way. Anyone against? Please show. No, thank you very much, everyone. That's unanimous. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, everyone. If we go on to the next item, which is item number 5, which is the report of the Head of Regional Internal Audit Service. Report 5, progress against the Internal Audit Risk-Based Plan 22-23. Is that you, Joan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm taking that one. As members are used to, this is our regular report at agenda item 5, which provides a position statement on the progress being made against the plan as at the 31st of December 2022. We've brought it forward just to sort of reduce the level of items on the agenda in the next committee. As you're used to seeing, Appendix A illustrates that 18 audit reviews have been completed as at this date, 14 with an audit opinion, while 6 reports have been issued in draft and 19 reports are audits are currently ongoing. An audit opinion of substantial assurance has been given to 3 completed audit reviews and an opinion of reasonable to 9. It's also noted that there's 2 limited assurance opinions being given, and details of those findings are within the body of the report for members. The finalist audits have made a total of 48 recommendations to date, 2 high priority recommendations which were made in respect of one of the limited assurance reports, 26 medium and 20 low priority recommendations. I just want to point out, it is stated in the report, but whilst it's pleasing that we have successfully recruited new audit staff during this year, the new staff are having an impact on the current resources available to deliver the plan due to the support and training that they require. To assist us with this, some audits have been allocated to SWAP to undertake on our behalf. 3 audits have been given to them: climate change and energy efficiency, which has been issued now in draft, the council self-assessment, which is ongoing, and they've just commenced the risk management audit on our behalf. So therefore, although the performance to date is lower than we did anticipate for 22-23, it is still felt that there will be sufficient coverage by the year end to provide an overall audit opinion. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan, for that. Are there any questions, anyone? Nigel?
Sorry, Joan, you know I'd come in, didn't you? Thank you. So thanks for the report. The covering paper was useful as well, and I appreciate the additional detail regarding the lower level assurances. So that's really good. You've addressed one of my ones, which is there is an awful lot left to do by the end of the year. So I think that's one of my concerns is just getting through it. And there's a couple that seem quite meaty left to do as well by the end of the year. So ones like the safeguarding one, for example, I know that's been allocated. Again, there's some ones in there that I certainly would definitely want to see before the end of the year. One sort of key question I had was around the opinion levels for the reports. There seems to be that there's a few that are coming out as reasonable assurance where they've only got one medium priority recommendation. There seems to be kind of, substantial must be very rare to achieve if you have one medium and that results in a reasonable, and then there's a big gulf then to limited assurance. I just wondered why that category was coming out if there was only one medium priority recommendation. I'm assuming you have sort of criteria within the team to set those.
Yes. If I can answer that, Chair, we do have criteria. We use MK, the audit software, and within there are parameters to guide the auditors in forming their opinion. So there's percentages in there which gives them a guide. However, it's not a hard and fast rule, and you're quite right. Normally, perhaps one recommendation shows that there probably is substantial assurance. However, that's dependent on the level of testing and the subject area and we always take the view that the auditor sort of has to step back, and although that's a guide, what is their overall feeling? And if we can't say there's substantial assurance because we haven't kind of captured enough to give that assurance, we go for reasonable. Is there a particular one that you were talking about though there? Sorry, not Mr. Ireland?
Not in particular. I mean, there's quite a few because there's a few of the school ones. There's a grant one that's also one medium. There's the Enable grant 21-22, which has got 2 low priority recommendations and is still rated as reasonable, for example. Why is that one quite low?
Sorry, the low recommendations.
Rather, why is the Enable grant 21-22 audit rated as reasonable assurance when it's only got 2 low priority recommendations?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the specifics, but there would have been there would have been things that they would have had to have put in place to make improvements. So although it was within the grant terms and conditions, and we could make the claim, there was probably, I know, some improvements they could make on that. But without going into detail, I can certainly look and circulate any specifics questions that you've got. If you'd like to send them to me, I can give you the more detailed information.
Would it be possible just if you've got like some, for example, in our team, we have a little narrative that just said roughly if it's going to be this number of recommendations, it would be, I know it's, and I very much appreciate it's only a guide. So I think when I'm trying to gain assurance over the processes in place, when that comes through, I'm kind of like, reasonable seems to be very easy to achieve with only a few findings. So it's just trying to understand what reasonable actually means. So if you've got some guidance that you're able to send me, that would be great on those.
By all means, yes, I can put something together and circulate it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joan.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor, good job.
Thank you, Chair. My question's very similar to that of Nigel. I was just wondering if you felt that your team had enough resources available to be able to take place enough of the audit backlog that's necessary for this year to then be able to take on the backlog next year, because obviously there's going to be a certain amount that's going to have to be taken next year with this match ongoing or not even allocated. Do you think that you'll be able to take on the backlog once your team are more properly trained and less resources have to be allocated to the new recruits?
Yeah, if I can start then, Councillor Goodjohn, and then I know Mark has put his camera on and he obviously want to probably add to my answer. As I've said, it has been difficult this year with the training, and yes, hopefully now the new auditors are going to be more productive next year. So before, you know, we are going to be in a lot better place going forward next year. You mentioned backlog. There will be audits that won't have been completed that were on the 22-23 plan. When we're putting together the 23-24 plan, obviously they will be considered, but they will be considered with other risks and areas that may have come up during the year that, again, we need to consider for the 23-24 plan. So that's not to say that these will necessarily all be carried forward, if you like. They will be looked on a risk level basis with other areas that may have come up as well, and will be categorised. Some of the ones, though, on Appendix A that haven't got any statuses on there, we haven't started pieces of work yet. We will be able to place assurance on other work that may have been done, and that's an exercise that I will be doing, and I have been doing as we've gone along. For example, Audit Wales, CSIW and Estim may have done work in certain areas that we can place assurance on certain areas, and where perhaps we've got project and programme management work, safeguarding work. Although we haven't done specific amount of work on those particular areas, we will have picked up those areas in discrete audits, so we would have touched on some of those areas. So again, it's not a complete answer that you're looking for because there's lots of variables, but we are happy that we will have done enough coverage for this year, and moving forward that can only improve because we've got a lot more staff resource available and staff that will be able to be more productive. But I'm sure Mark would want to add to that as well.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Chair, thank you, Joan. Yeah, just to add to that, I think for next year, I think the team will be in the strongest position it's probably been for many years, because the vast majority of vacancies have been filled. It's a bit of a backward step initially because it's taken additional resources from the existing staff we had to train up the new staff. But for next year, we'll be in a far stronger position. We've currently got 2 vacancies, a senior auditor and a graduate auditor. The recruitment of those was paused pending the outcome of the budget situation in terms of facing all 4 authorities. We've got a bit more clarity on that now, so we're hopefully waiting confirmation that we can progress with filling those vacancies, so that'll put us in an even stronger position, that being the case. But obviously the report on the draft report has only just gone up. We've got to wait for the finalisation of that budget report, so we fully understand what any budget implications for the Regional Internal Audit Service. But I'm hopeful we'll be in a much stronger position for next year, notwithstanding those 2 vacancies.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor Goodjohn?
Yes, that's brilliant. It's good to have your assurance that you feel that the team's going to be in a good position going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Just one more from me, which is the value of a shared service. Obviously, you're working across multiple authorities, and I know it's not as easy as comparing numbers, but taking into account, obviously, you will have done different audits at the different places. Just wondering how the results in terms of the assurance levels so far during the year is comparable with this organisation with the others you work with.
Thank you, Nigel. We're in a very similar position, to be honest. We're going to be using some additional resources that are nominally allocated to other authorities to make sure that we deliver the plans in the Vale, because the Vale and Bridgend, because that's where the historic vacancies have tended to have been. But we're using some resources from elsewhere to help deliver some audits. Joan has mentioned about using Southwest Audit Partnership swap as well to deliver some work as well. But in terms of the actual opinions, again, it's pretty similar situation. A few limited reports, but mostly reasonable, and some substantial. But yeah, and in terms of the question you asked earlier, in terms of the guidance that we use, it is a guide, but it's very much based on circumstances. But that's something we can look at going forward. Are we being maybe too harsh or too sort of strict in our interpretation? But yeah, that's something for us to reflect on, I think, going forward.
Thank you. It's good to hear that there's because it looks to me like the organisation's performing really well in terms of those assurance levels. So that's pleasing to see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nigel. There's no one else indicating for any questions. Does anyone have any comments? No. You see the recommendation then that committee note the content of the report and the progress made against the 2022-23 internal audit plan, a risk-based plan. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Someone second? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? Please show. No, thank you. That's carried unanimously. We got the updated forward work programme then next.
Yes, I can take that, Chair. If very brief report, it's the usual report that you get for every meeting, setting out what items will be appearing on the agenda at the next meeting. So at the 27th of February meeting, at the table under paragraph 2.3 sets out what we expect to be putting up, many of those relating to Gemma's area again in terms of accounting policies, lessons learned from the accounts, treasury management strategy, for example. You'll also get the internal audit report on tracking recommendation implementation as well, because as Joan said, we brought the progress against the plan forward to this meeting. And then you've got the corporate risk register as well, just to round things off at that meeting. So that was it, basically, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions, anyone? No. Any comments? Oh,
sorry,
Nigel.
Chair, I do have one just quickly. Yeah, just the next time. So we're not going to see another update on the internal audit plan until after the end of the year. Is that right?
Yeah, because it was agreed that we do it quarterly, so you'll have received up to the end of the third quarter, and then it'll be in the annual report then setting out in more depth, basically, the coverage and the opinions and the overall opinion on governance, risk and internal control in the annual report, which we would anticipate probably be May, possibly June, but probably May time.
Can I just request, can I request, Chair, that we have an update if there's any concerns over any significant inability to achieve the plan, that you just alert us to that then by exception? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Problem.
Can we have that as a recommendation then? Clearly, if we get it minuted as a recommendation, subject to everyone happy, being content with that recommendation moving forward. Is there any comments? No. Okay, you see the recommendations. You've got the recommendation. Consider and note the forward work programme, and secondly, that the committee asked to endorse a schedule of items for the next meeting on the 27th of February, subject obviously to the amendment Nigel's just made, that anything is brought to committee's attention in regards to the list, and obviously officers will ensure that the correct people are there for the items that are on the agenda. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Nigel. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Anyone against? No, that matter is carried unanimously. Let's get back, and then we're on, I think, to the exempt items. I think was the just get on. Any urgent items? Item 7, there are none. We then got part 2, which there aren't any. Item 8, there aren't any other items. Can I thank everyone for their attendance? Can I thank everyone for their input into the annual accounts? Our colleagues from Audit Wales, thank you for your support as well throughout. Thank you, councillors, for your input. And I now close the meeting because I believe some of you got another meeting at another place at a different time. So thank you all very much, and see you in February.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.